Hi, my name is Tim Lindquist. I'm a professor in the software engineering program at ASU, and this is a video supporting our course in mobile systems, Ser423. In this video, we want to talk about mapping in iOS. So I'm going to the schedule page, and this is Unit 10 on the schedule of material. And we're going to look at, Unit 10 is about media playback mapping and location services on both iOS and on Android. And we're going to look today at iOS and mapping at iOS. The background material for what I'm going to be discussing in the app that I'm going to be covering today can be found. There's a link for it on the Unit 10 set of resources. It's from Apple Developer, and it's all about maps for iOS app developers. This goes through the map kit and provides guides for how to use different facilities that are available through the map kit. Map kit provides all kinds of capabilities. We're going to look today at dropping pins and getting location from places on the map. But it supports geoservices. It also supports resolution, how much you want to include of different sorts of geographic locations and so forth on the map. And this guide actually goes through explaining how you do that. And there are also links to several different example apps that take advantage of it. And then you'll also notice that there are several different videos that go through this material as well. So Apple Developer is a great source for getting that information. But in any event, we have a specific app that I want to go through. This is Map a Place, and the Map a Place, let's go ahead and download it. It's packaged in a jar file, which is the same as all the other examples for the course. So I'm going to go ahead and save it, overwrite one that's already there. And then independent of how you open it up, as I said, it's a jar file, and jar files, you can double click on them, but I'm kind of a command line guy. And then just open it up. So here it is in Xcode, and the project actually contains several different parts. We're going to take a look at the different aspects of the project, but let's actually go ahead and run it first. I was afraid of that. Let me get this thing resized properly. I want to go ahead and run it just to show you what this particular app does, so you can see as we go through and pick out the different components of it, how those are actually provided. So I'm going to run it on the simulator for iPhone 7. And the simulator will start up now. So this comes up showing the map view, a map view as the only component in a view. And the map view actually has pins on it. Those pins represent different places. Pardon me, different places. We've been looking at using places as an example and as a set of exercises. So here's ASU Poly, place for ASU Poly. Without any extra overhead, when you render a map, it comes as being both scrollable, draggable and zoomable. To zoom in, it's a double click, so you can see and then to drag is to drag. And I've got the simulator set up so that in fact it's using the built-in keyboard as opposed to otherwise. But even so, the mouse actions, whether you're using the built-in keyboard or whether using the simulator's keyboard, It's the same thing for mouse actions or this, to get touches. In order to zoom out, hold down the control key with the simulator and then double click. See how well that works. We'll try the option key, not the control key. It's not the control key, it is the option key. So actually with the option key, notice that you get two circles. You can actually rotate and do other, all right, there's collapse and expand. So you can manipulate in the simulator all of the map as well. So so almost all of this is done automatically for us, except for putting points, annotations as they're called, onto the map. And we'll take a look at that. And then the other capability that's provided by this app is the ability to long press a gesture to enter a new place. So the place that I did the long press gesture will be remembered, or is remembered, and then we're going to enter a new title. So this is my house. All right, enter a new place's title and then a description of it. Okay, and then you can see that the pin appears up here, and actually when I single click on the pin, it displays the information that I entered in that dialog box. So, and then supposedly clicking any place else, that pin goes away. So let's take a look at the code and the other aspects of getting this project set up. I'm using JSON, which we've used before. Matter of fact, this JSON file with places has been used previously in the course. So it is a JSON object that contains information describing several different places, and I've limited the amount of information that's in this so that it corresponds with what's necessary for an annotation on a MapKit map. So there's ASU's Brickyard, ASU Poly, ASU West, and then these other hiking places that I've mentioned before: Revis Ranch, Rogers Trailhead, Grievous Grave, and there's also a Wind Cave that's on it as well. So these are just local areas in the Phoenix area. Most of them, or all of them, are out in the Superstition Mountains in the Phoenix. So I edited the places.json that we've used in previous examples and dragged that into this project. So it's going to be used to initialize those pins that we end up seeing. We're going to talk in great detail about the viewController.swift. But in addition to that, I've actually added two other classes. There's a thing called a placeAnnotation.swift, and that is a class that extends NSObject, but it implements a protocol, or in Java it's called an interface called MK, stands for MapKit, MK annotation. Annotations are things that you can describe or annotate a map with. And I just call it place annotation. It's actually fairly close to what we've looked at before for a place description. And then I have a place library, which is nothing more than a collection of places. We may take a look at this code in more detail in a minute, but it stores a collection of place annotation objects in a dictionary. All right, so I've got it highlighted in blue now. The dictionary has string keys, and then the values of those keys are place annotation objects. And it initializes that library from JSON that it gets out of the bundle, which is the file, the places.json file that gets packaged up and put onto the device. Okay, so let's take a look at the meat of the code. Well, let's actually go to the storyboard first so you can see the components that are on there. Let me get rid of some of the other components of this UI so we can see it a little bit better. And I'm going to minimize that. So we have a single scene, a single view, which comes with a standard single scene app. And to that scene, the only thing I've really added to the view is a map view, right? And the map view comes from the set of objects over here. If you scroll down, you simply have to drag out a map view, find it, and then drag it out into the scene. And then I actually ended up setting the constraints so that the map view with different sized screens would expand so that it'll fill the entire screen on an iPad as opposed to a 7 Plus or what have you, any one of the other iOS devices. So there it is right here. MapKit view is what I've pulled out here, and you can see the icon for it shows that it's a map. And as is default, the launch scene for this app, the scene that first starts up is shown to be that single scene that we have in the app. So I haven't done, I did. I actually pulled out one more thing, and that is an interface builder outlet, an IB outlet for the map view, and that wire up is right here. I'll highlight it in blue. IB outlet, weak variable map view, which is an MK map view. And remember, the way you do that is by, I'm not going to bring another one, but I'll just show you. Place your mouse into the scene or into the map view with it selected. Hold the control and bring it over. All right, so if I want to create another outlet, that's the way that I would do it. All right, and here's my option to create an outlet. And that's all we're going to do. Okay, so that takes care of the wire-ups and the storyboarding, very little storyboarding on this one. And now let's go ahead and take a look at the code. So the controller, so remember that the view itself, what the user sees, is all shown in the storyboard. That all gets translated into XML, and when the app starts up at the appropriate time, that gets sucked in and displayed to the user. But what we're really concerned with is the controller, which is the logic, the program logic that manipulates what's being shown in the view. And in the comments in this one, actually, it's the different points that I'd like for you to make sure that you understand, look at and understand in this example. So we've already talked about setting the map view up in the storyboard. The constraints, as I mentioned, we looked at before in the UI section of the class on setting up constraints. So the constraints in this case, all you have to do is set the default constraints for the view controller itself, and that actually, or you can go into the map view and set all 4 constraints so that it attaches, all 4 sides attached to the extent of the view. The IB outlet, we already looked at that for the map view. So now next, place annotation, and then for viewing an annotation and other sections in here as well. Creating and associating a gesture recognizer, and then the delegate for long presses for gestures. So let's take a look. The storage, the members that I have inside the controller, the view controller, I create a place library object, which is going to store my places. And then I also just have as a constant the region radius, which is the radius that I'd like to, it's actually half of the radius that I'd like for to be displayed initially in the map. And you can change this, and you can see this is in terms of meters. So every 1,000 meters, every kilometer is about 0.6 of a mile. So this is 50,000, about 30 miles is the range that we're looking at. And then the view did load method. Remember, that's the place where our logic will start for the app when this particular scene is loaded. So we call its parent, and then in fact we get the from the places library, we get the latitude and longitude for ASU Poly, and we're going to use that to create this thing called a CL location. So a CL location is exactly that. CL is the core libraries, and we have to specify a latitude and a longitude, and we're going to pass that to a method that I've written here to center the map on ASU Poly. So when the app starts up, its center, the center of the map is at the pin at ASU Poly. So I'm setting it to the lat lon. We haven't put the pin down yet, but we have centered our map at ASU Poly. And then we go through all of the places in the place library, and we tell the map view to add an annotation for those places. So this is a method that's built into the map view, and this is the MapKit map view class. And add an annotation requires that you have something that extends an annotation. So without going any further, let's take a look and see how that actually happens. If we open up the help and look up annotation, actually it's probably MK annotation. MK annotation. You can see that this is a protocol, and it's used to provide annotation-related information to a map view. So we can have other information if we want in our, as long as our class implements the protocol, then in fact we can use it. A map view can use it to provide information to the user about that particular place. All right. So this is exactly what I've implemented this protocol. The important things about the protocol is shown right here. There has to be a coordinate, which is a CL location coordinate, 2D location coordinate. Has to be a title and a subtitle. So let's go back to the code. And in our place annotation, we can see that we have place annotation extends NS object, and it implements the protocol MK annotation. And in implementing that protocol, you'll see that we provide for both of those, all three of those components. I've actually named one of the members to be coordinate that is the appropriate type, CL location coordinate 2D. So that's actually part of the constructor for it. And then I have two other members, a name and a description, simply because I use the place description as the basis for this, a class that we've looked at earlier. So in order to translate those into title, and then what was the other, detail, I think it was, I've added a couple of properties. Property called title, which is a string property, and the getter for it is return self.name. So it essentially equates the property title to the name, and then subtitle. It's not detailed view, it's subtitle. So here is the code, or an example of Swift's properties and the way you can implement getters for properties. I think we've looked at some other examples as well of getters and setters for properties. The only other code in here actually is to initialize a place annotation from a dictionary. This is using the JSON facilities in the place library. Let's just take a quick look at the constructor here in the place library. So I'm in the place library class. The place library class goes to the application bundle, and it picks up the JSON file, places.json file from that bundle. It uses iOS's built-in serialization class, JSON serialization, in order to convert the contents of this JSON file to a dictionary. In this case, the dictionary is of type string key, and then it has any value associated with it. And that dictionary then is used is passed to the constructor for a place annotation. So I end up with an annotation that gets placed, a place annotation that gets placed into the library. So the library does nothing more than collects all the annotations that I've created, and each of the annotations corresponds to a pin on the map. All right, so there's an annotation object for ASU Poly, an annotation object for ASU Brickyard, an annotation object for Wind Cave Peak, all right, and then the one that's kind of out of view here is ASU West, and annotation object for ASU West as well, which hopefully will come up. Maybe not. There it is, ASU West. So each of those are objects that are coming out of the library. So let's go back to the view controller now that you can see how place library does nothing more than provide the ability to to get a specific place annotation based upon its key, its name, or title, and to add a new place annotation to the library. Very simple one-line methods. And then there's another one that gets for us an array of all of the names of places or all of the titles of places that are stored as a way of, they're really just convenience functions of being able to provide information that's necessary to the view controller. So in the view controller, we've already gotten to the point where we've centered the map. Let's take a look at that method. Center the map on a location. Let coordinate region be MK coordinate region. Make with distance, kind of a long name for the class, but we provide it with location.coordinate. So this is the location object. It's a CL location, and one of its properties is a coordinate property. And then also a region radius times 2, region radius times 2, that provides for us the width and the height of it. And then map view.set region to this coordinate region, which I've just created, and then say it's animated in its appearance so that it phases in with an animation to do it. So that does nothing more than center our map and cause it to display. And then the last thing we do in the constructor is to get up here to the constructor, or I'm sorry, not the constructor, the view did load, is to go through the iteration that places pins on the map. All right, map view.add annotation, and add annotation actually causes a delegate method to be called that, it's down here. Very similar when we looked at table views in iOS. Each row or each cell in a table view has its own view, subview. Remember that views on both iOS and Android are hierarchical. It means that we can have view containers, and then within those view containers there can be other views. That's exactly what's taking place here. So this is returning for us a MapKit annotation view. And we're basing it upon the pin, which is predefined for us, so we don't have to play around with that much. But we do the exact same thing. We have a dequeued view, meaning that the system does not want to create any more views than it has to. There's a certain amount of overhead with doing that, so it reuses them. So when a pin goes away and is not being used, then in fact that same view can be reused and loaded with a different pin object. So that's what's taking place in the code in this one. Very similar to the method that we looked at for table view to get the view for a table view, and that was a view for, and it gave the row of the table as well as the column in which it was contained there as well. So there's a method that provides returns that view. Maybe reused view, or it may be one that's created within this method. And that actually takes care of that part of drawing all of the pins, right? Placing these pins on here. And let's take a look at now the logic that's necessary in order to, so I've got it set up so that when there is a long press gesture of 2 seconds or more, that it pops up an alert dialog box that has a couple of text fields in it that asks for it's essentially saying when you do a long press on the screen, that means you want to drop a new pin. So I need to have a title for the pin and I need to have a description for it. And that's how that pin information for that pin gets set up. So let's take a look at setting up a gesture recognizer and then and how we go about associate that, and then do the dialogue as well. I don't think we've actually taken a look at a dialogue. So I create a UI long press gesture recognizer still in the viewDidLoad method. UI long press gesture recognizer. Initialize it, and this is actually a carryover from Objective-C. This says that when the pressure gesture recognizer recognizes a long press, that it will do a callback or use this as a delegate. Self would be the object, this view controller object, and then the action is to call a method whose name is didLongTapMap, didLongTapMap, and passes it a gesture recognizer. So right below us is that function. Right? So this sets up a gesture recognizer. I'm going to associate it with my map view, but before I do that, I'm going to initialize it, tell it that I am, the view controller object is the delegate, and a minimum duration of a press is 2 seconds. 2.0 is 2 seconds, could be less than that. As long as it's more than about a half a second would be fine. And then associate that recognizer with my map view. Right? So this actually makes the map view, when we press on the map view and with a long press of 2 seconds, that it will cause the method below to execute. And that method, first of all, it gets the location. So I should mention that with each long press, there are two different events that are fired. One of them when the press begins, and the other one when the press ends. So once it's detected as a 2 second press, it will fire the event and call all of its delegates and let it know that in fact the state is that the press began. And then when the finger is removed from the device, the same method will be called again and say that the press has ended. So instead of executing this code twice, we're going to throw an if statement in here, so we only execute it when it begins. We could do it when it ends. It would have the same effect, but we do it when it begins. The two statements here do nothing more than get for us the coordinates. All right, so it has the ability, the map kit has the ability to convert for us a position on the screen based upon how the map is located. Right, so a position on the screen is in terms of x, y, where x is the distance from the upper left-hand corner going to the right. That's the x value, and then the y value is how far down. So if I do a long press on Payson, there's some number of pixels, x and y, that describe that location. Well, that's the first thing I do is get the point, and then I convert that point into a coordinate. The map kit has the ability, with any long press gesture, I can get the point, the xy coordinate, which is a CG point. But the next method provides for me mapView.convert tap point to coordinate from map view. Right, so it uses this map view, knowing what the lat lon is of the corners. Well, actually, probably just knowing the lat lon and its orientation for the origin. It can convert that into a lat lon, in this case for Payson. So if I do a drop a pin here. Got to be 2 second press. It will get for me the latitude. For Payson, all right, and draw the pin. So I've created, at this point, I have created a new object and done the query. So the next part of this code is to how to set up an alert view. We do that by creating an alert controller, and you can see the title in it is a new place, and then a message, enter the title and the description. And then I've added, here's an action that I would associate with a cancel button. It actually adds the cancel button and says the handler is I don't want it to do anything. But with the OK, that means that the user is not canceling, dropping the pin. I have associated with it we've talked about this in before in Swift. It's a thing called a closure, which is essentially a block of code that's unnamed. You can put a block of code in many different places. A block of code is just like any other variable or expression in Swift. So my handler is a block of code that gets executed when the OK button gets pressed. And that block of code is now shown in light blue. Self.newTitle is to get the title from that text field, or the prompts text field. Same thing with the description. And then I create a new place annotation. And then I add that to my places library, places.add, and then map view, add annotation, then adding that annotation place to the map. So that code that exists, seemingly exists in adding an OK action is what happens when the OK button gets pressed. And then the last two things are how you go about adding a text field. So a UI alert action can just be something that pops up, tells the user to answer the phone or whatever. They don't necessarily have to enter information. If I don't do an add text field, then in fact there's no way for the user to input anything. So these simply add text fields, and those text fields are referenced from within inside this OK handler. All right, so that takes care of the code that gets called when a long press is depressed, or when a long press gesture occurs. In this case, a 2-second long press gesture. So let's go back up here to the comments. They kind of were my driving thing here. In the delegate for the long press example, alert controller, we looked at the alert controller. That's not necessarily dependent only on the map view. That's something that's a very common thing to be used. But I'm not sure that we have looked at that yet. We didn't look at it at the UI session of iOS. And then creating an association of a gesture recognizer. Again, the gesture recognizer can be done either with code or it can be done using the storyboard. You can actually pull out a long press gesture recognizer object onto the storyboard and do the hookup there if you want to. Just as easy to do it in code. You can actually, in the storyboard, in the attributes inspector, you can also set these different properties as well for 2 seconds. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that. So that should take care of the material I wanted to talk about with respect to developing maps or using maps for iOS. So we went through adding pins, actually looking at an example of gestures. This is one of the simplest gestures, but in fact iOS has the ability to look at several different gestures as well, but this is one that goes hand in hand with doing mapping. Very good. So in the next video, we'll be looking at the same thing for Android and actually doing mapping using Google's mapping service.